Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into a mathematical idea from way back in 1931 that, believe it or not, some people think holds the key to the biggest questions about our own existence. So, let's just jump right in with a massive question, one that's moved from the pages of science fiction into some pretty serious debates. Is our reality, is it actually real? Or could we be living inside a ridiculously advanced computer simulation?
You know, on one side of this whole debate, you've got this really fascinating idea. It's the notion that Gödel's theorem proves some things are just fundamentally beyond the reach of math and logic. And for a lot of people, that suggests things like consciousness or free will might exist in a realm that's beyond simple ones and zeros.
But on the other side, you have folks saying, whoa, hold on, that is a huge leap. As this commenter puts it, it's a non sequitur. It just doesn't follow. You can't just jump from the idea that there are unknowable facts within our physical world to saying that things exist outside of it. So, who's right here?
Okay, to really get to the bottom of this, we're going to follow the ripple effect of this one super powerful theorem. We'll start at the very beginning in the world of pure logic, then we'll see how that idea jumped over to debates about the human mind, then to the fabric of reality itself, and finally to whether it might just be our get-out-of-jail-free card for the simulation. And then we'll wrap up by looking at the very strong counter-arguments.
All right, first up, a crack in logic. This is the story of the proof that basically broke mathematics. Our story begins in the early 20th century with this grand, ambitious quest for mathematical perfection, a dream that was about to get completely shattered. So, picture this. It's the early 1900s, and there's this massive project called Hilbert's program. The dream, the big goal, was to create a perfect, flawless, machine-like system for all of mathematics. A complete and totally consistent set of rules that could, in theory, prove every single true statement you could ever imagine.
And then, in 1931, this young logician named Kurt Gödel comes along and just drops an absolute bombshell. His incompleteness theorems prove that Hilbert's dream was totally impossible. He showed that any system of logic, as long as it's complex enough to do basic arithmetic, will always have true statements that it can't actually prove. Your system is either incomplete or it's inconsistent. There's no way around it.
So how on earth did he do it? Well, it was nothing short of genius. He created this mind-bending, self-referential mathematical sentence. And what it said, in plain English, was basically this: this statement cannot be proved by this system. Think about that. If the system proves it's true, then the statement is false, and your whole system is contradictory. But if the system can't prove it, then the statement is true, which means your system is incomplete. It's a perfect logical trap.
So this little logical trap didn't stay in the world of pure math for long. It started to ripple outwards, and it sparked a really fascinating debate about us. That brings us to Section 2, the human glitch. Are our minds more than just machines?
This is where the Penrose-Lucas argument comes in. They said, look, a computer is a formal system. It gets stuck on its Gödel sentence. It can never prove that it's true. But we, as humans, we can step outside the system, look at that sentence, and just see that it's true. They argued that this insight, this moment of understanding, must mean our minds are doing something that isn't just computation.
Okay, the next ripple out from Gödel's theorem takes this idea from our minds to everything. Section 3, reality's unfinished symphony. Is it possible the universe itself is, in some fundamental way, incomplete? This is where the philosopher Slavoj Žižek enters the picture. He takes this idea of incompleteness and applies it directly to ontology, which is the philosophical study of being, of what it means to exist. He basically suggests this gap in logic isn't just a quirk of math, but a fundamental feature of reality itself. And he uses this absolutely beautiful analogy from the music of Robert Schumann. Apparently, in some of Schumann's pieces, the main melody, the part you'd expect to be front and center, is just gone. It's silent. All you hear is the piano accompaniment playing around it. The entire song is structured around a central, missing piece that your own mind has to fill in. And that's exactly Zizek's point about reality. He's suggesting the universe itself might be ontologically incomplete, a system with these fundamental gaps, kind of like an unfinished painting or a detective story with a crime that never gets solved. In his view, reality is partly defined by what isn't there. Okay, so this is the crucial point. If our minds, and maybe even reality itself, have this kind of non-computable, incomplete quality to them, what in the world does that mean for one of the most popular sci-fi theories out there today?
Section 4, escaping the simulation, the ultimate Gödelian twist. This is where it gets seriously mind-bending. There's a recent study that makes a really bold claim. It argues that if reality, and our ability to understand it, requires that non-algorithmic insight we've been talking about, that it simply cannot be an algorithm-based computer simulation. Full stop.
The study's author, Dr. Meir Fazal, lays it out perfectly. He says, any simulation is inherently algorithmic, but since the fundamental level of reality is based on non-algorithmic understanding, the universe cannot be and could never be a simulation. I mean, that's basically a mathematical checkmate against the whole simulation hypothesis.
But hang on a second. Before we all run outside and declare ourselves free from the matrix, we really need to pump the brakes and look at some very powerful counter-arguments. So let's move to our final section, the map versus the territory, a word of caution. The biggest, most common criticism is captured perfectly in this one simple phrase from that Reddit thread: don't confuse the map for the territory. The whole argument is that Gödel's theorem is about the limits of our formal descriptions of reality, the map, not the limits of reality itself, the territory. And yet, this slide pretty much sums up the expert consensus. Most logicians and computer scientists see these big philosophical leaps as a misapplication of the theorem. They argue that, our minds aren't one single consistent system. We make mistakes, we contradict ourselves, our thoughts are way too messy for Gödel's proof to apply directly. It's an incredible proof for sure, but it's about the limits of a very specific kind of logic.
So, at the end of the day, Gödel's brilliant proof showed us that any system of logic has a blind spot. And that leaves us with one final, really fascinating question to think about. Does this incompleteness show us a fundamental limit of machines, or does it actually reveal a limit of logic itself, a boundary that maybe even our own incredible minds can't ever cross?